Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome, I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today was born in India and raised in the U.S. since the age of 9. She has a BA from Stanford University and an MFA from California College of Arts. At age 62, she published her debut novel, The Henna Artist, which immediately became a New York Times bestseller. A Reese Witherspoon Bookclub pick, was longlisted for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize, translated into 26 languages, and is being developed into a series by Netflix. The sequel, The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, is also being translated into multiple languages, and the third book in the trilogy, The Perfumist of Paris, will be released March 2023. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Alka Joshi.
Thank you so much for having me, Julia. This is quite an honor.
Well, it's an honor for us to have you. I told you earlier that I'm a real fangirl of yours, so I'm so excited about having you here on our podcast today. Our opening question is always, so what took you so long to write a book?
Well, I think that like anything else that we want to be good at, Malcolm Gladwell says it takes 10,000 hours to do that. And I do think that I had to put in my 10,000 hours before I could learn how a novel is constructed and how to make it so that the tension is always there in every scene, so that the reader is propelled to continue on with one chapter after another, turn that page, and also to develop characters who have very three-dimensional qualities. They are good, they are bad, they are weak, they are strong, they do things we like and they do things we don't like. And so that just takes time to learn how to do all of that, and to learn how to do all of that, just like in a symphony with 50 players, to learn to do that so that it all comes together in a very organic way. So, what happened with me is I had never intended to become a writer. So that wasn't a part of my journey. It was not something that I was like focused on and putting my mind to. It was just because I had 2 years of downtime while we had that 2008 recession. And my marketing and advertising business was really slow because so many clients were saying, we don't know what's going to happen. A lot of people are getting laid off. We've got to, put these projects on hold. I said, okay. So in those 2 years, what was I going to do with myself? I always like to keep busy, and I love to learn new things. So I took my husband's advice. He said, honey, I really have always thought that you could write long form fiction. So I enrolled in an MFA program. Luckily, it's only a 2-year program, and it's intensive. It's so intensive that you learn how to write a novel in 2 years. Some people are writing short stories, other people are writing poems and essays, but I really only wanted to focus on the novel. And at the same time, what was so fortuitous is that at the same time, I was making multiple trips to India because my younger brother had bought a condo there. And Jaipur is the place where we still have a lot of our extended family. My mom wanted to go back to Jaipur. She wanted to hang out with her friends and family. And so she said, hey, take me there, Alka. Why don't you leave me there, finish up a semester, come back and get me? So we made that trip about 4 or 5 times while I was in my MFA program. So can you imagine? Here I am thinking about what I'm going to write about. And here's my mother telling me all kinds of stories about growing up in India, about the fact that she had this arranged marriage at 18. She never wanted to leave college, but she didn't have a chance to ever go back again. Within 4 years, she had 3 small kids to look after, and her life was never her own. And then I said, well, Mom, how was it that you raised me so differently? With me, you never said you're going to have an arranged marriage. You're going to have to become a doctor. You're going to have to do this or that. And she goes, well, I just wanted you to be able to do all the things I never got to do. So I thought, wow, I wish I could reinvent my mother's life. And then I realized I'm writing fiction. I could do that through a character. So Lakshmi becomes my mother's alter ego. Lakshmi gets to do all the things my mother never got to do. Lakshmi leaves an abusive and arranged marriage. Now, my father in real life is not abusive. It's just an arranged marriage that wasn't serving Lakshmi that she left. And then she went on to forge this amazing life as a henna artist, as an herbal healer. She's celebrated throughout the city. People come to her from everywhere. And that was something I think my mother could have done. She could have had her own business. She was smart enough and had great people skills. So I think she could have done something of her very own, but she just never had that opportunity. So that's where Lakshmi was born. And then from there, it's totally fictional, what happens to Lakshmi, what she decides to do, how she decides to do it. But there's a couple of other cool things. My mother told me while we were in Jaipur one time that she had an audience with the Maharani. I think to myself, well, of course, the Jaipur royalty have always been omnipresent in the city. They were constantly available to people. It wasn't like the Queen and multiple attendants in England. The royal family in Jaipur was always at the Jaipur club playing, with polo, or they were playing tennis. The Queen was always in her Bentley driving around. The Maharani was driving around. And she would stop and talk to people if they wanted to talk to her. And so I thought I could have Maharanis in my novel. Of course, in 1955, they would have been even more accessible than they are now. So that gave me that idea. And then, all of the food that I included in the novel, that all came from all those trips to India and my mother making food and telling me what she liked to cook and how she developed these recipes. And I would say, Mom, write them all down for me. She said, honey, that's not how we do things. It's all organic. We don't know how many tablespoons of this and teaspoons of that we put in. She said, you're just going to have to watch me and write it all down. So that's kind of what I had to do. And do you remember, Julia, there was a book called Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe by Fannie Flagg. Love that book, love the movie. I loved it all. And she had so many recipes in the book, including how to make fried green tomatoes. And I loved that whole book. And I just thought, if I ever write a book someday, and, at that point, it wasn't even on my radar, but I thought if I ever wrote a book someday, I would include recipes. Fast forward 20 years later, and here I am including recipes in my novel that my mother taught me.
Well, I think all of us stood around our mother's kitchen tables and tried to duplicate their recipes, because my mother too said I'm a dump cook. That just meant she dumped things together and she never did measure them out. So I can see you standing there, because I was in that same place at my mother's elbow trying to write down those same recipes.
Right. And, to this day, I am a haphazard cook. Like I don't follow a recipe. In fact, I think I almost deliberately don't follow a recipe. Like, I'll find that I don't have certain ingredients. Rather than going to the market and getting those ingredients, I just think, oh, what else? What can I substitute? I'm always doing stuff like that. And so, yeah, I think cooking is such a big part of not only the Indian culture, but of any culture.
Yeah.
And I think including a lot of what we eat in the narrative of the Henna Artist, the Secret Keeper of Jaipur, and now the third book, The Perfumist of Paris. I think what I'm doing is letting people in on the culture. Spices are such a big part of the Indian culture. Spices that the European traders were so crazy for that they made all those long treks from Europe into Asia to be on the spice route and get those kinds of things. Cardamom and clove and cinnamon, and then of course a coconut and sandalwood and all those things that grow in hot places, hot tropical places like India. So it's okay. So here's something kind of interesting. It started out, the whole thing about the Henna Artist and wanting to pay a tribute to my mother and her amazing personality. It started off like that. And yet, as I got deeper and deeper and deeper into talking about India, talking about spices, talking about food, talking about what it was like for people post-independence, as they started to think about how to develop this country from scratch after 200 years of colonialism, I think that I really developed a sense of my heritage. I reconnected with my heritage in a way that all three of my books now are really a love letter to my birth country. And readers from all over the world write to me or call me or, however they can get a hold of me. And they say that they have learned more about India from my novels than they ever had from their history textbooks. And that, to me, I feel like job done.
I agree. I think you have given us such a vivid portrait of that country. You've made us want to wander through those marketplaces and see those spices piled high, So I think you've made all of us want to journey to India.
Excellent. Well, I love that. So many readers contact me and say, will you do a private tour for us through India? I'm like, I don't really have time for that. Thank you.
I'll
Julia
sign
raises
up.
her hand.
I'll sign up if you do, if you're the guide.
Oh, that's so amazing. And where I'm from is a desert. Rajasthan state is a desert. So all of the beautiful palaces and the Rajasthan stands for land of the Rajas, which means that every single city had their own royal family. So in the desert of all places is Jaipur, Udaipur, Jaisalmer. These are all cities where the royals had beautiful palaces and forts and, elephants that are decorated that, got them around. There's so much history and culture in Rajasthan that I think that's why people love going there. They love exploring all of that heritage and the history.
Well, once you wrote this first book, how did you proceed? I assume you searched for an agent.
Okay, so this is kind of interesting because I think my journey is a little bit different from a lot of people's. I was working with a mentor in my MFA program. Her name is Anita Amirezvani. She is a fabulous writer, and I loved her books. And I wanted to write something kind of similar in the sense that it was historical fiction taking us to another culture. So I asked Anita if she would be my formal mentor throughout the program. Every semester, we had an opportunity to work with one instructor. So Anita worked with me throughout my 2 years. And then shortly after I got my MFA, and the Henna Artist was my thesis, my mother died. And that came as a huge shock to me. And I was in so much grief, and I just stopped writing. It didn't make any sense to me to continue writing about a woman who is no longer here. And, I just thought I just can't do this. Well, about a year later, Anita called me and she was talking to me about all of that. And I was telling her about my mother. And she said, Alka, maybe you should start working on the novel again because it's really good to write about grief. When you're in grief, that might be one of the best times to write. And so I have some ideas on where you should go forward with this novel, because I know it's not ready to be published yet. And I took her advice, and it took me another year to return another revision to her. She made more changes. I returned yet another revision. And then she sent it to her agent. And next thing I know, I am having a call from Emma Sweeney in New York. And she is saying, I love this manuscript in front of me. Let's work together on this. And I immediately went to, oh, I'm going to be published. This is it. This is the big kahuna. I'm going to be published now. No, Emma said, you have a lot more work to do on this novel before we can get it to be a bestseller. And I said, what does it matter if it's a bestseller? Why can't it just be good enough? And she said, because when you're a debut novelist, you need to get that first book into a bestseller category, or you will not get a second contract for a book, and you won't get a third contract or a fourth. If you want to be a full-time author, if you want to be taken seriously, that first book really has to sing. So, you know what? Emma had 30 years of experience, and I decided to listen to her. So I followed her advice through another set of revisions and another and another. And 3 years went by like this. And I had done about 15, 20 revisions at this time. And I got really upset. And I just said, Emma, I'm so frustrated. How are we ever going to know whether the book is ready unless you talk to publishers and let them know what the book is about or send them a manuscript? And she said, no, Alka, you are not ready for that yet. And we only get one shot at this, right? You cannot return the same manuscript to the same publisher or editor. You can't do that. So she said, now I think you need to work with a professional editor. Well, I didn't even know they existed. So she said, these are people you hire, you pay them. They look over the entire manuscript. Okay, fine. I hire my first editor. She looks over the whole manuscript and she goes, you know what? Here's something you could do differently. Here's something you could do differently. I would suggest that you change the trajectory of this particular character. Boom, boom, boom. I am looking at 30 revisions. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to do this. I have hired the wrong editor. I am the wrong editor. So then I hire another editor, pay her to look over my manuscript. She sends me back even more changes and more revisional ideas. And I was just like, you know what? This is ridiculous. This whole writing thing is so different from what I thought it was going to be when I watched the movies and TV shows. In movies and TV shows, somebody sits down at a computer, they write the whole thing out, the pages are coming off the printer. Next thing you know, they're sitting and signing books at a bookstore. Okay, that's not reality. Everybody, please, just devolve yourself of that notion. That is not, that just disabuse yourself of that notion. It's not ever going to happen that way. So then, I gave up writing altogether again. I just thought, this is not going to happen. I am obviously not talented enough to have a book that Emma thinks is, ready to go out. And a year later, I was looking through my desk drawer for something. And, keep in mind, I'm working throughout this whole time on my marketing and advertising clients. And I'm looking in my desk drawer for something. And here's this whole big manuscript. And I think to myself, wow, I spent so much energy and time on this. Why am I just letting it fester? And so I started to read it and I thought, oh, wow, I can't believe I wrote it. And I think a lot of authors have that feeling, like they start reading their own work and they go, when did I write this? And I thought, this is pretty good. I'm interested in the characters. I want to go on. Why am I not getting this published? Maybe I should go back and read those editor comments. So I looked at all the editorial comments and I started working on them. And they weren't really that difficult. And I realized they're not really changing the narrative in any big way. They're just like little nuances here and there that would make the book so much better. I did the changes. I sent it all back to Emma and I said, Emma, this is like my 25th revision of this novel. It's been 9 years since I started working on it. Could you please send it off now? I am so frustrated that at this point, if you don't send it off, I'd like to look for another agent. And so Emma said, well, you could have actually gone to another agent at any time. You and I don't have a contract, which really came as a big surprise to me. I don't know why. I just thought we had a contract. So she goes, I'll send it off. Don't worry. She sent it off, and within 2 months, we had a contract with HarperCollins. Now I had a new editor, Kathy, and Kathy had more changes that she wanted me to make, and some of them were pretty substantial. So I made those changes, and it took about 18 months from the time I signed the contract to my release date. And then about 6 months prior to my release date, they send the whole thing off to the printer and they match it to a cover and, get all that stuff done. And that was when I started working on the second novel during those 6 months. And I just thought, okay, Malik is in my head. He just keeps bugging me. He's like, you've got all of those revisions that you did where scenes about me got cut out. Scenes about Malik got cut out. Scenes about Radha got cut out because everybody just said, focus on Lakshmi. She is the main character. These are the kind of notes that you get from editors. And so I cut out all of those things, but Malik wanted them back in. And so I thought, okay, so I start working on The Secret Keeper. I'm 20 pages into it when my agent says, let's send this off to the editor. So she sends it off to HarperCollins. Kathy looks at it, and immediately within a week, we have a second book contract. And you see, this is exactly where my agent wanted it to be, right? She predicted this is what you do. You make a really good book, then you get a second book contract, even before the first book is out the door and on bookshelves. That was pretty amazing to me. And the same thing happened when I started working on book number 3. Because while Malik was the centerpiece of The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, Radha is now the centerpiece of The Perfumist of Paris. And I started writing that. And Kathy said, give me some pages to look at and read. And I said, I don't have any pages, Kathy. I'm just so busy promoting both The Secret Keeper of Jaipur and the Henna Artist. And she said, all right, write me up a synopsis. So I wrote her up a synopsis, and immediately we have a third book contract. That's kind of how my journey has been. I don't think it's what everybody's journey is like, but I think, Julia, what's happened is that I'm finally doing the thing that I was meant to be doing all along in my life. But I could never have gotten here at the age of 20, 30, 40. I had to start at a much later age to understand what grief is, how you get through loss, how you rebound from something tragic happening in your family, how you pick yourself up, after something that's gone wrong, and how you can always see that there is always light at the end of the tunnel. There is always an opportunity to see hope when it feels as if all is lost. So I don't think, there's no way I knew any of those things in my early years. So I love talking to you about this whole authors over 50, because I really feel like telling everybody, you know what, don't be in a hurry. There is life to be gotten through. There is life to be learned from. And then you can start writing, and it will be so much richer.
Well, I assume that when people call you an overnight success, you have a good laugh about that.
I do. There is no such thing as an overnight success. Even if you think about actors whom people say that about, or directors, man, those guys have been working at their craft for 20 years before they get a break like that. And some of them started very young. They might have been 4 years old. Like if you think about what's his name? Ron Howard. He started as little Opie on the Andy Griffith Show at 4 years old. And of course, he's not an overnight success. He's been working at it forever. So I think that, we all need to sort of, look at the reality of this process. And the reality is it takes time to learn how to write a novel, and you need to have patience. You need to have patience with yourself and patience with the process. It doesn't do any good to be frustrated with yourself, to be frustrated with the people who are helping you. But go ahead and take time off. Like I had to take time off at various moments because it just was frustrating me too much. And it will, at times you will lose your patience with it. So just don't lose it with other people. Just go ahead and keep it to yourself and just say, I need to back away. I need distance from this for a while. And then when I get back to it, I'll have a fresh perspective.
Well, I have not had the pleasure of interviewing a Reese Witherspoon pick author yet, so we have to hear about that experience. I'm sure that your publicist and publishing house were instrumental in getting the book to Reese's company, but tell us about what transpired afterwards.
It was amazing. So I get a call from my editor, and Kathy says, I need you to sit down because this is amazing. Reese Witherspoon loves your book. And apparently, there's some scout in Hollywood who had read the book, put it in front of her, and said, you got to read this. I think you're going to love it. And she did. So the call from Kathy said, they're going to feature your book for the month of May 2020. And what you're going to do is a month before, you're going to be working with the Hello Sunshine people. They're going to tell you what kind of social media content they need. They have some things planned. And why don't you come up with some ideas yourself about what you can do online? And I said, well, first of all, we can make samosas. That would be a fun thing to do because, the recipes, and I talk about all of those in the book. And then I said, okay, another thing I could do is talk about my mother's jewelry, talk about her saris, talk about how saris are put on in different ways, depending on which area of India you live in, and also depending on time periods. So we did all of those. It was so much fun. And then they had all that content together, and then they started pushing it out on Reese's platforms in the month of May. And then on May 1st, I got a chance to talk to Reese Witherspoon. It would have been in person had we all not been on lockdown. And that's the other thing that happened is the day after my book was released, everybody went on lockdown. The pandemic was announced by the World Health Organization, and I really thought we were dead in the water. So this is another lesson that I keep learning over and over in my life. Just when you think all is lost, there is light at the end of that tunnel. And so, and Reese for me was that light. But also readers were that light, because what happened during the lockdown is that everybody started reading. We all got tired of the same old things that we were watching on streaming shows. And so people turned to reading, and publishers sold a lot of books during lockdown. They also sold a lot of audiobooks and ebooks, and that trend has not stopped. It was as if we changed the behavior of a lot of people to listen to audiobooks as they drive around, as they walk, as they do any kind of activity. And I think it really helped push those sales. And I was so grateful because there was a time, if you remember early on in the pandemic, when the bookstores all closed down and they weren't even shipping out books because we didn't know how COVID was caused. And so we just assumed, okay, it was caused by touching things or touching people, or, we don't quite know how it's happening. So that was really fortuitous. Now, let's go back to Reese. So in the month of May, we are doing all these Reese programs, and they are pushing out these videos that we've done. And then about 10 days after I spoke to her, 14 days, something like that, I get a call from movie producers, and they're all calling and they're saying, we want to buy the option to the Henna Artist. Now that was kind of mind-blowing because yeah. So I called up my agent and I said, what do I do now? And she goes, okay, we have a contact in Hollywood whom we refer our clients to. She's a screen management agent, and her name is Ellen Goldsmith and Goldstein, and she runs the Gotham Group. So I started talking to Ellen, and she was a great mentor. She told me all about how Hollywood works and what I should do, should not do, should talk about, should not talk about. And so we interviewed several of the producers and the actresses who were attached to their project. And that was really fun for me because I learned so much during that process. And I ended up choosing the team of Michael Edelstein, who was a producer of Desperate Housewives for all of those seasons and did really well with that. Frida Pinto, who, of course, is the Slumdog Millionaire star, but also, she's been working this whole time since Slumdog as an actress, and she really loved the book and wanted to play Lakshmi, so that was great. And their third partner was Miramax TV. And Miramax TV, had wanted to option something that had diverse characters, that had culture, that could sort of fill in this niche that they were missing. So with all three of those, I'm hoping that we will have an amazing product that is just going to sing. I know it's not going to be the book. It's not going to be the book because the book is only 300 and some pages. And once you're doing a limited series with 60 minutes over, let's say, 8 episodes, that is, a lot of pages to fill in between. So they're going to have to make up scenes. They're going to have to make new characters. They're going to have to do all kinds of things. But I think that I have chosen the people who will have the most integrity about what is at the core. And at the core of the Henna Artist is the agency of women. Women who get to have agency. How much do they get to have? Women who don't have agency and what happens to them? Women who fight for agency and what are the repercussions of that struggle? So that is at the core of the Henna Artist. And I really hope that they will maintain that. This is not, I don't see the Henna Artist as a love story. The Secret Keeper of Jaipur has more of that kind of romance and love story in it. And I think that the Perfumist of Paris also has more of the sort of husband-wife relationship in it. But I, Earl, ultimately, I didn't want to write a romance, and I'm hoping that the limited TV series is not going to be focused too much on romance.
Well, it's just such an exciting time for you, and to have your books out there and to have so many readers who love them so much. They want to see a very good job done on the big screen. Tell us a little bit about the book that you've brought today, and if you'll honor us with a few paragraphs so that we can hear your tone and voice in the book.
Thank you. Okay. So in book number 3, we are now in 1974 Paris. Radha, who was Lakshmi's younger sister at 13 and caused no end of problems for Lakshmi, including the fact that she became pregnant by the son of one of her biggest benefactors. Radha is now 32. She has grown up. She is married to a Parisian whom she met at the age of 18 while she was still in India. He was traveling through the area where she was. They fell in love. She eloped with him in true Radha style. She's very impetuous, or at least she used to be. Now, she finds herself in the fragrance industry. That's what she does for a living. She loves fragrances because they are such a natural part of her Indian upbringing. In India, you are assaulted with fragrance everywhere you go. The spices all have very strong fragrance. People wear hair oil, coconut, rose, all of these essential oils on their bodies that have very strong fragrances. And there's incense in all the temples. Everything, you could pass a temple on the street and you will get the waft of incense. So you are assaulted with fragrances. And for Radha, it's just a natural thing for her to be involved in this industry. She works in a fragrance lab. She is on the cusp of designing her very first solo commission. So her scent that she has been given is to create a fragrance for the woman in Manet's painting Olympia. So she goes about it. And she will find the ingredients that she's looking for finally when she goes to India along with Lakshmi. And they go to the houses of the courtesans. The same courtesans who taught Lakshmi how to paint with henna are going to teach Radha about this perfume that she needs to create. So she is triumphant. She finds what she's looking for. She goes back to Paris. Who should be sitting on her living room couch but the boy she gave birth to 17 years ago, who is now looking for his birth mother and wanting to know about her. This is the shock of her life because that is an experience, a time of her life which she has locked away in her memory. She doesn't want to think about it, has never told her husband about it. She has locked that thing away and thrown away the key. And so she is shocked when this happens. So what I would like to do now is read a little bit about how she's feeling about working in this field when her husband, remember, this is 1974 and it is France, and there's a little more chauvinism in France, I think, than there was maybe here in 1974, although I could be wrong about that. But her husband is looking for a very stay-at-home housewife, and that's not what Radha wants to be. She wants to be out in the world. So I'm going to read you a passage where she's thinking about this. It's that tiny nugget that I protected and nurtured that's allowed me to pursue my life's work. That raw animalic part of me connects with fragrances the way bees home in on pollen and hummingbirds on nectar. If I hadn't pursued my passion single-mindedly, despite Pierre's objections, despite the time I stole from my daughters, I may never have discovered my natural talent for and love of working with fragrances. I may never have come to value my skills the way Pierre values his. He's always known he'd be able to focus his energy on building his career. It was always expected of him, and it's what he expected of himself. Why then does it feel as if I should apologize for focusing on what I love to do? That's what Pierre can't forgive, isn't it? I'm being selfish, keeping the me part for myself instead of relinquishing it all to him. But do I have to? Delphine doesn't. Mathilde doesn't. Florence doesn't. Do I become selfless and devote my entire life to my husband and children, or split myself in two? One part of me surrenders myself to my family. The other part dedicates herself to growing her talents, not giving myself completely to either.
That's lovely. Thank you so much. You know, I love your premise in this book because I was an adopted child and I searched and found my birth mother. So that really hits home to me.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Oh, you know what? You know what I did? I talked to adoption experts, adoptees, and adoptive parents because I wanted to get that part of it correct, and I wanted to be sensitive to people who are going to read this, like yourself, and see if it rings true.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. Because your book, the first book, was a rocket ship, did you ever fear that the next ones would not be as accepted?
Yes, of course. Because I think that, you know, like a lot of authors whose first books I loved, and they got a chance to work on them for such a long period of time. Of course, you know, they were just fantastic. You know, the remaining books are good, but maybe they're not as good. So yeah, I had a huge, and I think I still do have a huge worry about that. You know how Tracy Chevalier's first book, which I loved, The Girl with the Pearl Earring, I read all of her subsequent books. I love her writing, but it's not The Girl with the Pearl Earring, right? Kay Gibbons wrote this fabulous book called Ellen Foster. It was her first book. I loved it. But her subsequent books, even though I like them, I don't feel as passionate about them. So I think there's a lot of people who are going to just love the Henna Artist. And the subsequent books, I think they're going to like, and they're going to be with characters again whom they like. But perhaps they won't be quite as passionate about them as they are about the Henna Artist. I'm hoping that the third book, though, is going to really resonate with women who are struggling with the work-life balance. And I think there's so many of them, and we've all struggled with it. And I don't read enough books about it. You know, I don't read enough fictional characters who struggle with it. So I want to be able to connect with all of those women and just say, it's okay for you to put yourself first. It's okay. It's okay, because men do it all the time. So why not put yourself first? Why do you, because you are the vessel for children, have to constantly put yourself last?
Very well said. And Alka, our Last interview question is always, our writers over 50 are such a unique set. Do you have advice for writers 50 and above?
Yes. First of all, make sure that you study and do workshops with people who are established writers who have published recently. That's really important. A lot of folks who are over 50 have been away from school for a really long time, and they don't realize that the instructors who can really help you get to editors and publishers are the ones who have recently published. So there's a lot of instructors out there who may not have written a book in the last 20 years or so. And I would say, maybe they're going to be good at teaching you certain parts of writing, but they're not going to be able to network, in the other direction for you. So that's number one thing. Number two, it's don't be in a hurry. I used to think, let me at least publish this book before I die. And, I'm glad that it took as long as it took to get the book out there. I'm glad it took 10, 12 years for it to be out there, because it couldn't have been as rich as it is without all of that time. And I made so many friends along the way and so many great mentors along the way that I wouldn't trade that time for the world. So even if it's taking you 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, just know that all of that is going into your book and making it so much richer than it could have been.
Well, we just thank you so very much, because you're such an encourager and such an uplifter and such a wonderful mentor to women. And we just appreciate your being with us today and sharing your love of writing and reading with us. And even though the Henna Artist is our first love, I'm sure that we're going to love the other two just as much. So thank you so much. And now we're excited to say that you're one of our authors over 50.
Thank you. Someday, I hope I'll be one of your authors over 70.
I'm going to interview you again when that happens. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday, when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend, and check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's DAILY, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing, and remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.